So good morning, everyone. I am so excited. I feel like I say that every time, but I am connected with some of the most amazing women, I think, that are out there. And so today is no different. So today is Adimika Arthur. I want to say how I know her. So I have mentioned this before, but I am part of the Chairman Mom community. And I went on a retreat years ago, and Adimika happened to go too. And so I decided that this woman is amazing. And I do what I normally do, where I kind of just get in there and like, let's be friends. And then here we are. So we're also going to circle back to right now, she is running a sisterhood course that I really want to talk about that is eye-opening in so many amazing ways. So Adimika is, let me tell you about this thing. And I keep doing this, have to write it down because so many women are amazing. So by trade, Adimika is an epidemiologist. She's great to talk about COVID with. She has run hospitals. She is in healthcare consulting. She is founder and executive director of HealthTech4Medicaid, which I want to touch on because that's humongous. And then she's running the sisterhood course that I want to talk about, especially at this time. You are a Black woman running a sisterhood course with a lot of white women. And I think it is fascinating and it's beautiful. And I want to talk about that. So hi.
Hi. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, it's still morning your time.
I was about to say, what time is it there?
It's I don't know, 9? Yeah, it's
9. Okay, 9 a.m. It's still morning. So what would you say overall? What do you do? Like I would say, oh my God, I didn't even mention this. You also launched a podcast today.
It's all the same through line. It's all the same through line. I promise.
So let's talk about that. What's that through line? So what do you do? How did you get there? Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So one, I think I've always been a nosy kid. Okay. I was one of those kids who always liked to, what my family called ear hustle, like eavesdrop and listen to other people. And I learned a ton that way. And I think what that taught me is, one, I'm a big people person. I love people. And that kind of led me to being an epidemiologist more than any other aspect of medicine, partially because I'm curious and I always have a million questions and I want to understand how things work. Like but I also think in a frame of community. I don't think individual, right? I don't think like, how can I solve your diabetes problem? I think about how can I solve the country's diabetes problem, right? So I always think in a big frame, and I've always been, I think, an impact thinker. Mm-hmm. So that kind of tells you a little bit about my occupation. I actually got into hospital administration because of Medicaid. So I'll tell you a little bit about that. Yeah. So deep public health experience, worked in public health departments in this country, and then also the Centers for Disease Control. And while I was at Alameda County, which is the 7th largest county in California, there was an opportunity for the state of California to expand Medicaid. And they were having, difficulty trying to figure out how to do this. This is the first state to expand Medicaid in the country. This is back in 2004, well before the ACA, right? So what we hear of as Obamacare or expansion of Medicaid. So the way that the state decided to do that was to go to all 58 counties and say, give us your best and brightest ideas. We're going to select a few of them, package them up, send them off to the federal government and see if we can leverage a demonstration project. Okay. And Alameda County's, plan, which I made up at my kitchen table by talking to tons and tons of people and being eavesdropping and listening to, people in the community. We got selected. So my life quickly changed from we got this huge, $40 million infusion of money to kind of improve the healthcare of our community over a several year period. And so one of the things my mentor told me was follow the money. And I was like, huh, what does that mean? Yeah. And it took me a second to kind of figure it out. But what he offered for me to do is the best way for me to make change and to make an impact is actually to have a little bit of control of the pie. And so I actually left the county and went to the local hospital that got 70% of that grant money to actually make sure that change actually happened. And that was a fascinating, I mean, one, I don't like being told no. So that's part of my personality.
I know this about you.
You figure that out. Most people figure it out pretty quickly. So I had no experience running hospitals, right? So I go to that hospital CEO. He's a brand new CEO, the 11th CEO in 12 years in this community. So under a lot of pressure to do incredibly well. And I basically was like, hey, I just brought you a whole bunch of money to your system. I'm now going to work for you. And he was like, but you're not a hospital administrator. And I was like, oh, but I am now. Right. Like, I mean, I just like, there's kind of nothing that I feel like I can't do, which kind of got me to what I do today. Right. I've been a hospital administrator for a long time. I'd worked at the, public hospitals. I worked at a large academic medical center, one of the top in the country, and then worked for a not-for-profit system and felt like I was just beating my head up against a wall, always being the person, always being the woman, right? And certainly I was intersectionally the woman of color. And it was really a hard ladder to climb. Like there just wasn't, people weren't used to seeing people like me. They thought I was, the person who ran the janitorial department, or they thought that I was, I would get stopped all the time when people would say, are you the parking attendant? And I'm like, no, I run the hospital. So I think that's where like the intersection between kind of bias and, our white supremacist society really kind of hit. And I was wondering, like, how can I continue to make an impact? Right. I felt like, being a woman of color was really impeding, being a woman, right, was impeding me from being able to be successful. And I saw so many problems that needed help. One of those was I lived 16 miles away from Silicon Valley, right? And we were just being told like health information, and health technology, it's going to upend healthcare. It's going to change everything that we do. And I thought, wow, I need to get on this innovation train. And what I realized was they weren't thinking about the communities I knew needed care, right? Like I was kind of confused. I would meet with like these incredible, innovative company CEOs, and we'd be talking and I'd be like, that's great. What are you doing for vulnerable people? And they're like, huh? And I'm like, like, what about government programs, right? Like Medicare or Medicaid. And they'd be like, huh? And I'm like, wow, that's a fifth of Americans, right? We're talking about well over 75 million people. You don't know what Medicaid is? And they would look at me like, why would we want to serve them? Like, so I realized, wow, there's a huge disconnect between this entire field. We allowed an entire field, health technology as a field, to come into play. And we had no healthcare ethics. Like, so we really don't care about people getting healthy and well. And like, it was mind-boggling to me. So I decided, like, I've got to fix this fast. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I woke up in the middle of the night thinking about like how people are going to be left behind, and certainly communities that look like me. And it prompted me to kind of quit my job and learn how to, like, how big is this problem? Like I took it very epidemiological. Like I got a grant and a planning grant and put a bunch of people together and decided, is this a small tent issue or big tent issue? And I realized there was nobody in this country doing the work that we do. So my nonprofit is called HealthTech4Medicaid, and we kind of sit between where health equity and tech equity meet.
Okay. Oh God, it's so big. It's completely fascinating. So let's pull a little bit on that thread, but I mean, obviously a lot of people don't get, there's no money in poor people is basically what they start to, you know what I mean? Like Silicon Valley. So how have you, because you've been doing this, for a while, how have you kind of pulled the world along with you? How have you gotten people to get it, basically? Like, how have you pulled people on the journey?
Well, I'm still in a continuous, I always call myself, they say innovation's a disruptor. I always say that I'm the irritant. So I'm very well known for being the irritant. One, I believe that because I was in healthcare for so long, I don't do anything following the rules. So one, we're a container, we're a vessel. We are a convener for bringing disparate thought together. So payers, providers, policymakers, entrepreneurs, people on Medicaid and their families, advocates, investors, and throwing them together. They don't speak the same language. They don't understand each other. They don't think they have a lot in common. And then you realize like, oh, wow, we can really solve this problem. So that is the model that we really, we do kind of operate a little bit like a startup, very agile.
Yeah.
I don't like being told no. So that's the first thing, right? We've identified that. So I elbow my way into lots of different conversations and meetings. And that's one thing, is being an irritant and being loud. But the other thing is really dispelling the myths. Like there's some massive myths around Medicaid, right? Yes, there are poor people that are on Medicaid, but there's 75 million people on Medicaid, right? Yeah. There are people that are differently abled. There are people that are genetically unlucky. There are so many people, and it's 1/5 of America, right? And that's just the people who are on Medicaid. There's another 22.5 million people who qualify for Medicaid and aren't even on Medicaid, right? So when we look at vulnerable people in this country, you know, we serve vulnerable people. That's really our interest. I use Medicaid as a frame because it helps us to quantify who we can actually help and who we can't. But you're looking at 120 million people in this country. So we all have a neighbor or a friend or a cousin, or it could be our parents.
A grandparent, a parent. Yeah,
absolutely. And oftentimes people don't even think about it. Like, you know, you have a child until something happens to you, you have a child who's autistic and you don't realize that the aid that they get at school is paid for by Medicaid funds. Right. So it's all intertwined. And we're all a part of the solution.
Yeah. I love that. I mean, it is going back to those Silicon Valley people that just think they hear Medicaid, they automatically go to, well, they don't have money, when in reality,
well, I will say this much
go ahead.
So 2 things. One, health is our largest economic driver in this country, right? If we're not healthy, we can't contribute, right? We can't work.
Bingo.
We can't contribute to the success of this country. Yeah. So it's in our best interest to have everyone be healthy. Number 2, Medicaid is not a small business. It's a $650 billion industry. So there are lots and lots of people making money off of Medicaid. Yeah. The question becomes a matter of how do we do it better?
Yeah. Oh, I love you so much. Okay. So let's talk about a couple other things.
Sure.
Let's touch on this podcast. Tell me about this, because you said the whole season just dropped today. Big launch.
Well, first episode of the season dropped.
First episode of the season dropped. Yeah. It's called Bring a Friend. Tell me about how that started, who you're doing it with, why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Okay. So this is along the same line of sisterhood. So, you know, pandemic hit. I'm an epidemiologist, know all about, worked during the last pandemic, which most people even know was a pandemic, which was SARS. So I know about what I think, how I think the country's going to operate, what I think the destruction is going to be. I never imagined what I'm seeing today, partially because we never took this virus seriously. I'm going to leave that aside. But what I am going to say is it exacerbated and really opened up the wound for people to see how fragile our healthcare system is in this country. Yeah. One, all of our hospitals, all of our health system run on a just-in-time process, meaning we have just enough stuff to have the basic things that could happen, not any sort of catastrophic thing.
Right.
The second thing is not everyone has access to the same stuff, right? Like, you know, you're close enough to Flint, Michigan, but like they still don't have clean water, right? Like, I mean, not everyone has access to the same things.
Yep.
And then the third thing is really the health inequities that have been a part of this country's fabric are readily exposed right now. You know, who's dying, who's able to get into to get a vaccine, like all the many issues.
Yeah.
The biggest portion for me that was challenging, and remember, on Medicaid, when you think of Medicaid, the biggest population is children who are on Medicaid, right?
Right.
The second largest is women. Women are over 37 million people on Medicaid. Right?
I did not know that.
Yes. 53% of the births in this country are Medicaid births. So more than half of the people that are born in this country are born to Medicaid. So the woman issue, and I say woman with an X, really being gender sensitive here, is a big issue for me personally. And I talked a little bit about my professional career, about being a woman, often being the only person in the room, being a woman of color, definitely being the only person in the room.
Right.
And how I could make things easier. I always want to think about my legacy and how we can imprint and make this world better. If I got hit by a bus tomorrow, how did I make a difference? So in thinking about women, and I myself, you know, I'm a mom. I had 2 kids at home. I was trying to work from the kitchen table, which I'm still sitting at. My husband's in the other room working. I mean, it was a shocker to the system, even for those of us with means and resources. And I mean, it still is. It's still very challenging. But last year, the numbers just kept ticking. And I told you I'm an epidemiologist, so I look at numbers all the time. And to look at over 2 million women in this country who were removed from the workforce, either forcibly removed, or voluntarily removed, we, and there's calculations now, women have moved themselves back almost 23 years from a policy perspective, right? That to me is frightening. This is not a mom issue, right? Like this is actually, we have spent 20 years, 40 years, right? You know, to like just get access to seeing the boardroom, like down the hall, like not even being able to be inside the boardroom, and certainly not being the one at the boardroom running the meeting. So we have a long way to go. And so to think that we've now moved back another 2 decades and a half, I was like, oh no, right? And what that means for people who look like me, you know, for brown and Black women, we're even further back. So Lord, I mean, we can't go any further back than 20 some odd years ago. Think of what Black women were 20 something years ago. Many people couldn't even go to school, right? I mean, it's a trip of a, so what I realized is like the key to liberation, women's liberation, is really the cooperation of women working together. And that really started with a few things. One, that's what started this deep rooted thought process around how can I bring women together? What do I know about my own sisterhood journey? I didn't have a biological sister, but I have lots of people that I support. You know this about me because you know me. I'm a person who people always would ask me like, wow, why are you so nice? Or why are you willing to help me? Or, you know, like they thought it was a strange thing. And to me, that was just like, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? Is that the right thing to do? And I thought that was really fascinating. I wanted to dig further into that. Like, why do people think I'm not serious? Right. When that sisterhood study turned into lots of drawn out conversations with a colleague who you know, Jillian, very well, who's Sarah Lacey, who had a community. And so we decided to co-conspire together, which is, I think, the best way to do anything, right? Not to do it on our own, but to co-conspire. And part of Sarah's interest really was post George Floyd. She was thinking like, God, what could I do differently and better? Right. And, you know, like many white women, she was like, let me pick up another book. And I was like, no, let's not pick up another book. I mean, you can pick up another book. But let's take action.
Yes. That's exactly.
And that's where I said, you know, Black women, our key to liberation is really through white women's cooperation. You have to be comfortable working with, understanding, having friends, being close to what, you know, Black women. You ask most white women in this country if they've ever worked for a Black woman, it's a silent conversation. Exactly. Right. And so if you've never worked for a Black woman, then how many Black friends do you have? And how authentic are those friends? And I'm not saying you have to work for someone but you have to be able to see it, right? You have to be able to see it. And so, we like co-conspired on a framework that I had already put together and spent some time on, and did a beta test, which you're a part of, right? And, you know, 75 women decided to sign up, and we have been going through a 6-month intensive interpersonal, like intrapersonal with a group, and then a part of a very large community to be evangelists for sisterhood, for being evangelists, for standing up, fighting for women, whether you're in the same room with them or not, if they look like you or not, if they're from your same background or not. Like, this is the way we're gonna accelerate past that 23 years. Like we got to move 23 years ahead. Quickly. So that means we got, you know, we got 46 years to make up for here. So that also was the same through line. So women, like how is it that I could, like, I've been in healthcare my whole career. Those are where my deep roots are. That's where I make a difference every single day. But I also had to figure out, like, what else could I do? What else could I do in my own community, lifting women up? So that is actually gets to the podcast. So the podcast is called Bring a Friend. It's with a very good friend of mine. We grew up in the same city, very different backgrounds, very different lives, very different experiences. She runs another community called Parlay House, and Deborah Mills.
I'm a part of that.
So
Because of you.
Yeah. So Anne has a very different community.
Yep.
And that community is around her own struggles with being a woman in corporate America, realizing and deciding, like, after a health scare, right? Like literally had a cancer diagnosis and found she lost her job because of that, and found she went from high powered New York businesswoman to not having any friends. Kind of like, as people talk about, they have a divorce and like all of the friends end up going with the husbands. Like, you have, what is left? Like, what have you actually built? So she was like, what is it going to take for authentic relationships to be built for women that don't involve a business card, that's not transactional? She started this movement in 2012, and I've been supporting. And so a part of this process was like, I was like, Anne, I think you need to take some of these messages to the airwaves. Like, I think we could have incredibly interesting conversations, and our worlds are so different. She grabbed a couple of friends, I grabbed a couple of friends, and now we're showing them to the world. And so our first episode that launched today is on the first female Scotch maker in America. And she's fascinating. But there's some big names. And some, so our tagline is kind of where real people shine, and people who shine kind of get real. So it's a way to hear about women who are definitely, changing the course of life, right? In history. And also just everyday people, but also, celebrities that are also making a huge difference. So it's a fascinating way to have these really intimate conversations. And for me, like, I always feel like I need that oxytocin high, right? That sisterhood high that we often don't get to have. And so this is a nice way to have a dose of it. Like, it's a podcast. It's a very, not that it doesn't have dark notes at times, because everything in the story is not, there's a harmony to all stories,
right?
But a way to really to think about ways to inspire yourself to help us move that 23 years ahead that we got to go together.
Oh my gosh, I love that. So you've kind of answered some things on why sisterhood and why that's important. And I'm so excited about this podcast. I want to know, and I know that's where you get some of that oxytocin, some of that delight. So what would you need if you put that intentional ask into the world? What would you want? How would you want, I should say, the community to show up?
Sure. So I always think you have to take care of yourself, right? And for me, that prescription is a little bit of like fresh air and nature, right? It's being able to have space to think. And I'm a good proponent for therapy. I think having some sort, and your therapy can be anybody, right? But I think having someone to bounce ideas or thoughts on is super helpful. The other thing is, how do I want folks to show up? I want folks to understand it is challenging to support other people, right? But it's okay. And you don't have to, like, things don't have to be right or perfect for that to happen. A lot of times women want to like give you a name if they think you're going to contact them, if you're going to write the email the correct, like, let's not get in the middle of these transactions. Open up your whole Rolodex, let the world flourish. It's like planting a garden.
Yeah.
You don't want a garden of all the same things. Like, I'm a wildflower kind of girl, right? Like, just throw the seeds out there, let them organically grow and even take over. And that's what we want. I want there to be a really incredible future for women. I don't want people to have the same sort of struggles I've had personally or professionally. And I'm still on this journey, right? Like, and like, I talked to my 90-year-old grandmother, she's still on this journey, right? Like, we have an obligation. Like, I think that the price you pay for being on this earth, right, is to try to, one, be a good citizen, but I think two, try to be a good sister.
I love that. I mean, I will say I've learned so much. I don't even know how many months, we're like 2 months in, maybe 3.
Yeah. Shocking.
It feels like so much longer, but
we just started our 3rd month, like 2 days ago.
The intentionality of, and this is why I love this, because it is that whole, like, don't just read a book, do the action. I think, you are very much, you and Sarah both are very much laying the historical groundwork. Right. So things to think about, but also let's talk about class, and let's talk about race, and let's talk about sisters we have, sisters we, that are not from birth,
chosen family,
like the difference between a historically Black sorority yours, versus a white sorority, mine, and what that looks like, and the difference. It's just so fascinating and really, really lovely. And obviously when we're done, which I hope never ends, but when we're done,
never.
like, you know, and you roll this out again to the masses, I just can't wait to be an evangelist for it, because it's just really, really powerful, and really fantastic. So thinking about time, I could literally talk to you for like hours, which
anytime
for a while, but how do you, and you've said this a bit before, you know, when you have that legacy, you know, did I make a difference? But what is that? How do you want to leave that trace? Like at the end, like, what do you want to, at the end, and they're like, Adimika did this. When someone stands up at that podium, gives that eulogy, what do you want it to say?
So I really want to make a difference in the lives of people who struggle. And we all have struggles. So I guess I want to make a difference in everyone's lives. I want to know that the power of people is there, right? And that's a global frame, right? I think day in, day out, I breathe kind of the voice of the vulnerable, people that whose voices are not often heard, thought about, considered. And that is such a wide breadth, but I think that we could get so much from other people's talents. And I think the lessons I have learned in my life come from very unusual characters, right? They're the people you meet at the bus stop. You know, they're the person who works in the sedentary job, driving the bus. They're the lessons of humanity, right? Of care, of consideration, of integrity, of those are the things that's the engine, the fuel that powers our communities, right? It's not the things we think. We often think the money drives our community. That is not it. If we lost the, you know, person who's our barista, and we lost the person who runs the local, you know, gym or the local, you know, gas station, those are the things that hold our communities together. And that's where I want to make an impact. I want people to know that they make a difference. I want everyone to know that they can contribute to making this place so much better. And I want for my boys, right? Like I have 2 boys. I want for my boys to be safe and secure and live in a society where I don't have to explain to them, like, you need to be careful and that not everyone loves you the same way I do, right? Like I really want us to start to heal as a country and acknowledge where we've been and look so forward to where we're going to go.
Oh my God. I could literally talk to you for, I have goosebumps all over, such goosebumps. It's so good. I'm so thankful for your time and for the work that you do to make this country better and sisterhood better and women better and me better. I'm just really grateful. Thank you so much for having coffee with me this morning.
Absolutely. I think I had tea, but I had coffee like 3 or 4 times earlier today.
Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.